Sharkie Gamer here. So today we're taking a look at the WarMouse Meta, an 18-button laser joystick mouse. So this is the front of the box, and you can see it's got a cool image there of the actual mouse. It says WarMouse Meta, 18-button laser joystick mouse, 5600 DPI. And down the bottom there it says Transcend the Mouse. Moving up the top, you've got the WarMouse Meta logo, and up the top there it says contain 64 game and application modes and the OpenOffice.org suite. Moving on to the side of the box, up the top there it says basically WarMouse Meta. Then moving down it says 48 commands on 64 modes. Assign 48 custom game and application commands to each of the 64 on-mouse Meta modes. You can download and import new modes created by others, or create your own custom modes in the Meta modeware. Takes the point out of point and click. The WarMouse Meta can eliminate more than half your daily mouse pointer movement, and significantly speeds up your interface activity. It even records click statistics so you can track your productivity gains. Analog/digital joystick. 6 joystick settings provide analog control with 7 joystick buttons, 8 directional digital movement in MMO and RTS games, or the use up to 10 keyboard shortcuts in your favorite games and applications. And the bottom there it says the king of all computer mice. Rule your desktop by utilizing high-end game technology in both games and non-game software applications alike, whether your primary application is CAD, graphic editing, video production, 3D animation, word processing, email, or just surfing the internet. The Meta has a mode for you. And on the other side, it sort of just lists a bunch of applications, as well as some games. And that's just basically modes created by default. Moving on to the back, we can see another picture of the actual mouse. And at the top there it says, the most advanced mouse we've ever seen in gadget. Features 18 double-click buttons, 6 analog digital joysticks, 5600 laser sensor, 64 on-mouse modes, 48 commands per mode, 512K flash memory, Meta modeware, PDF mode export, multi-language support, firm grip rubber coating, 1.85 meter USB cable, Windows XP Vista 7 compatible. Transcend the mouse. And I'll just read the description down here. Interface evolution. The WarMouse Meta is a transcended technology step that takes you beyond the world of conventional gaming mouse and into the future of interface, combining the most useful aspects of the mouse, the keyboard, and the joystick with twice as much memory as the original Macintosh computer. The WarMouse is a giant leap forward in the evolution of computer input devices. Speed and productivity. Scientific studies have reported that the normal user clicks his mouse 7,400 times per week. Each click takes an average of 8.5 seconds due to the need to scroll across the desktop to click an icon or pull-down menu. The Meta is designed to reduce the number of mouse clicks required to perform application functions, while also reducing the time required to trigger a command. Initial tests indicate that it will reduce the number of mouse clicks by around 50%. Meta clicks are also faster than the conventional point and mouse action, because eliminating the need to scroll across the desktop can reduce time to click by as much as 85%. Ergonomics. The Meta also takes a very different approach to ergonomics than conventional gaming mice. Instead of trying to make repetitive motion more comfortable, the Meta is designed to eliminate as much of it as possible. A 50% reduction in mouse clicks means 192,400 fewer sweeps of the wrist over the course of 1 year for the average user, which help reduce the risk of injury due to highly repetitive motions. Customization. The 64 default modes included with the WarMouse Meta are merely the tip of the application iceberg. The Meta modeware mouse management and customization software is designed to permit the easy creation and customization of modes for every kind of game and software application. A complete 48 command application mode can be created from scratch as little as 8 minutes, and the inclusion of copy mode, copy category, or copy function feature means that you can never necessary to reinvent the wheel. And the PDF export and display mode map features that are a reminder of what function is assigned to each button, or button double click is only a single click away. So that is the description that they have on the box. So let's open this up and take a closer look at this mouse. So first up you get a disc, and the disc has basically the software, modeware, and it's obviously got the OpenOffice.org suite on and stuff like that, and a bit of manual on there, a bit of like stuff like that. So it's basically got all your software on it. Okay, let's just pull the mouse out. Okay, so this is the WarMouse Meta. So you can see how really unusual it looks, being an 18-button mouse. So first up, it's USB cable. It's got a decent length of cable. It's not really that long, but it should be enough to go to your computer. Moving on to the mouse, first up, you've actually got basically 18 buttons. And the 18 buttons consist of your main mouse buttons, so you've got your 2 clicks at the end. You've got 14 configurable buttons, scroll wheel click, little button click on the side there as well. Now of course you've got a scroll wheel which goes up and down, it also clicks down. The shield button just clicks. You got a joystick here, which it's an 8-directional joystick, so it does go in all 8 directions. So you have forward, back, left, right, and on the sides as well. And the whole mouse as well as the joystick is covered in like a rubber type finish. It's to add a bit more grip, especially on the joystick there. On the bottom, of course, you've got your sensor in the center there, and that is a 5600 DPI sensor. So it's got a nice sensor on there. Just says WarMouse Meta. And it's got some mouse feet as well, and they do help the mouse glide very nicely. I've tried on a couple of mouse mats, it seems to glide on any surface, so it seems quite nice. Now before I go into more features of the actual mouse, I will just cover software, since software is a main part of using this mouse. So software you use to customize every single button on this mouse, that's right, every single button, that's all the 18 buttons, scroll wheel, joystick, everything, is called modeware. Now the software is very customizable. It has up to 64 modes set up so you can actually switch between them, and that's basically games, applications, all that type of stuff. Each mode can have about 48 keyboard, joystick or mouse commands per mode, so it's a lot of commands that you can set up per each mode. Now there's 64 modes assigned by default, but you can download more or you can create your own. You can set up your own and assign key presses, keys, special buttons and macros to both the mouse as well as the joystick. And of course you can add multiple categories, so you can have categories for your strategy games, categories for first-person shooters, pretty much anything that you can think of. If you design work, you can have a category for design, etc. The list goes on, so multiple categories you can actually assign to it. Now also, once you've actually made these modes and you've set up all the commands and everything, you can export and export modes to XML format, so that you can back up as well as swap out unused modes. And that basically allows you unlimited customization, because obviously you finish a game, you don't really want it, but you want to keep it back up in case you go back to it. You can just export it and back it up. And of course you can also do the standard type of thing, like you can change the double click speed, the scroll wheel, like scroll length and lines, so like 1 to 100, pointer speed, as well as DPI sensitivity, so you can change it anywhere between 100 to 5600. You can also change the joystick. So there's a couple of different joystick modes. You can either disable it altogether if you don't want to use it. You can assign it to an 8-directional joystick. 4 buttons, so just 4 buttons like that. 8 buttons, so it's also got the diagonal. Or you can set it as an analog joystick with 7 buttons. So analog joystick means it works as an analog joystick, and it kind of picks up all those directions as buttons. And of course you can also do an analog joystick with no buttons. So you got a couple of different choices with the joystick actual to actually use the joystick in different apps or different games or whatever you're particularly using it for. So, function. How does it work? So, once you've configured or created your own default modes in the actual software in ModeWare, so once you've got that all sorted, you know exactly which button you want to do what, that's when you can start using it. So now your standard left and right click are actually these end buttons on either side. So this is your left click. This one over here is your right click. Now you've got a scroll wheel in the center, and that's just basically a standard scroll down, scroll up, and you'll also click. And it's got a quite nice rubber grip on there, so you can actually really nicely scroll it really easily. Okay, so moving on to the buttons. So these lower buttons here, and the ones I'm talking about, are these 4 just there and the 4 just there. So the 8 lower portion buttons. And these buttons are actually really kind of stiff. And when you press them, you're actually pressing them more forward to trigger them. So they're not your normal kind of mouse buttons that would click too much. So they're a lot stiffer. Then of course you got your 6 higher buttons up there, and these tend to click a bit more. And then moving on to the side here, first off you got a shield button, which is like a shape of a shield, and that feels more like a normal mouse button. And you can also double click this one. It feels much more closer to a mouse button that you're used to. And then of course you've actually got the joystick here. So like I mentioned before, the joystick has 8 directions, so you can go forward, back, up, down, and of course diagonals as well. But you can change that to whatever you like, so it doesn't have to be 8 directions. You can have like 8 directional, 4 buttons, 8 buttons, analog, no analog, or you can just disable the joystick, or you can also use this thing called Alt Stick. And what Alt Stick basically does is that this joystick clicks down, and Alt Stick allows you, when you're using it on a surface, you click the mouse, or you click the joystick down, and then you can move the mouse forward, back, left, or right. So it just gives you 4 extra commands that you can assign to Alt Stick, which allows you just to move your mouse slightly to trigger that said command. So it can be used in games or applications or whatever you actually want to use it in. So it's just another way to give you a little bit extra commands to assign to it. Now, like I mentioned before, the shield button can also double click, and out of all these buttons, the shield button I find is the only one that really feels like a traditional mouse button. It feels more closer to a traditional mouse button, while these are all pretty much standard kind of buttons. These ones here are a bit stiffer than the rest of them. So overall, how does it perform when you're actually using it? So the idea that you have all your commands on your mouse is great. That way you have everything you need right there, instead of relying on both the keyboard as well as the mouse, and of course moving your mouse across to click sort of icons and things in the actual program. So it's just to make your productivity a bit better, and you know, you can actually do more with the mouse, have everything at your fingertips, so to speak. And that's a really great idea. And the joystick is also a great idea, especially if you're playing a game and you want a bit extra functionality for using in games, either to use it as your main directional to walk around or something, or to use it in applications as extra buttons, extra things to assign, extra things to swap. So overall, the features, this is a feature-packed mouse. It's got a hell of a lot of features, very customizable, lots of different things you can do with it. And like I said, the software just allows you to do outrageous amount of customization, huge number of profiles for both applications as well as games. So this is ideal for like, you know, if you have multiple apps and stuff like that, both in the general. So you've got like Firefox, you've got like Word, And then of course you've got your design things. Maybe you have like a 3D animation program, Photoshop, anything like that you can actually use this with, and you just create your own custom profile. So in that regard, this mouse does a lot of things, and it is amazing in terms of what it can actually do. But the problem with the mouse is that it's not really been designed that well. I feel it is a little bit cheaply built, and the overall design could have been better. For instance, the first thing that you really notice when you start to use this mouse is the first right and left click. So you've got your left click here and your right click over here. But to actually put your hand here and actually press them, if you do your normal, because these fingers are normally what you do your right and left click, it's really hard to actually reach. So it's a bit of a stretch to actually get those click like you would normally do. You could, I guess, use this finger, but it doesn't feel very natural to do that. But you could, of course, adapt to it that way. But I find because the buttons are tiny and things are stretched, if you have a small hand, it's easier to press the buttons, but it's more, you have to actually stretch, so it's more comfortable to actually stretch across the mouse to reach different commands. But if you have a large hand, it's easier to reach everything, but it's harder to press the tiny buttons. And again, this has a really steep learning curve. Really steep, like it's not for basic users. It'll take a long time to get used to this and to remember what each button does and everything like that. So really steep learning curve. And back to the design as well. What I found with this mouse is like it seems to be very inconsistent. Like these buttons down here are very stiff. Like these ones are just really stiff. And the ones over here, when you press them, they are a little bit lighter, but they're still pretty stiff and compared to these back buttons. So it's very inconsistent how these are stiffer, these ones are not as stiff, and these ones aren't as stiff at all. Like, I feel that it should all be sort of like this side. And mind you, I bought this mouse brand new, so it's not just because I bought it used or anything. I bought this mouse brand new, the box was sealed. So it's not just like a fault from people using it or anything. This is a brand new mouse, open out of the packaging, and straight out of the packaging, brand new. It's very inconsistent in terms of the actual strength you got to use to press the buttons. And I find all these, you have to press the buttons more forward. So really, in first using it, I did not like those buttons whatsoever. They didn't feel natural. They didn't feel like they needed to be more responsive when you actually press them. And since it's so inconsistent on both sides of the mouse, it doesn't feel quite right. It just feels really inconsistent. Like they should have improved the design, maybe making the buttons a little bit bigger and spread them out a different kind of way, or even make the buttons a bit higher quality. So that is probably one of the biggest problems for me in terms of the buttons, because I really want those nice kind of almost like mechanical buttons, like a mechanical keyboard, so that you can actually have a really nice click and it responds instantly, instead of sitting there trying to think, have I pressed it? And it doesn't do anything, and then finally you press it, and then it does it 3 times. So that inconsistency is just not as good as what the mouse advertises. Now, for a gaming mouse, the mouse itself aims pretty well in the actual game, so you can aim pretty well, but again it comes back to those buttons. The buttons aren't as responsive as a standard mouse. Yes, they're easy to reach, and you can pretty much, if you have like something like a shooter, you could pretty much cancel that using the keyboard altogether if you really wanted to. You just use the joystick to walk around, and you use these commands as your normal left and right, and these you could use as your other commands. So you can pretty much rule out using the keyboard altogether and just use the mouse. Which, I mean, if that's something you're after, then this might be for you. But I found when trying to game with it, it takes a bit of use to, and one thing to do is when you're right and left clicking, especially in shooters, it's such a stretch away, it doesn't seem right. You know, it's really uncomfortable to actually use it. So again, it comes down to the uncomfortable, you have to stretch across to get it. Again, the buttons, I just don't like those buttons, using it while gaming and everything like that. And the joystick, like I said, you can use it while working. The one thing is though, you're using the joystick to walk around as well as maybe trigger other commands. You're moving this to aim, alright? And doing that all at once and then trying to remember what button and having the buttons not work properly can be a very frustrating experience. So it can be gotten used to, like if you use this for a long time and you kept practicing with it, then you could get used to it, but it would take a lot of practice, and it might lead to quite a few kind of frustrating experiences with it. And the same thing sort of goes to design work. Like, I do a bit of design work. I've got 3D modeling applications, I've got Photoshop, I've got all those kind of design applications. You know, design work, again, like, the buttons are just not responsive enough. You know, when you press the buttons, you need to have a nice kind of click to them, so that when you press them, then it's instant reaction. Instead of clicking and think, why isn't it not doing anything? And it's because you haven't clicked it hard enough, or because these buttons are stiffer than these other buttons over here. So, very inconsistent. Again, it comes down to the build quality of the mouse. If they could improve that and maybe improve the design so it's more comfortable to actually trigger the buttons, then, you know, it might be a different experience. But other than that, I mean, overall, it's a really interesting idea. It's a great concept. They've really tried to make an ultimate type of mouse to put everything. So you're basically combining a mouse, keyboard, and a joystick all together. So in that regard, they've done a really good job. But because it's so inconsistent, the build quality isn't as high as it should be, and it's a really steep learning curve. Like, I mean, really steep. This is definitely not for basic users. It's such a steep learning curve. Like, you'd have to practice with this mouse for ages to really get used to it and really be efficient with it. And like I said, like, you'd have to have quite the perfect hand size would be like a medium hand size. If you got big hands and you kind of get let down by the buttons, you got small hands, you get let down by buttons, having to stretch and reach. So it's really, like, it doesn't seem to fit any person specifically. So I guess they need it needs some work to be improved. It is a good idea, and I really like the idea of putting a joystick on a mouse. I think that's pretty cool. But again, it comes down to comfort factor, and if maybe the top part was more ergonomic designed, the buttons are laid out a bit better, maybe the joystick would feel a bit more natural to use. So overall, it's a really good idea, really good concept, really good attempt at making sort of an ultimate type of mouse. And I guess if you want an 18-button mouse that has a joystick on it, and really a lot of customization, then this mouse might be for you. But you just got to be prepared to be patient for that really steep learning curve, and just hope that maybe your mouse doesn't have such inconsistent buttons as the one I got. So yeah, when I used this, whether it be design, general use, or gaming, I did not like it. Like, I used it a bit to just give it the benefit of a doubt, but after using it a bit, I tell you, with those buttons are the thing that bugged me the most. Just the inconsistency of them and not clicking immediately. I just don't like this mouse. It didn't really help me at all with my design stuff. Like, I like the idea of having all those commands on your mouse, but I prefer, especially with gaming, just to use the keyboard. It's just so much better. You know the keyboard's going to work, you know the keyboard's going to respond, and instead of relying on these buttons, and you press something and it doesn't actually trigger, because the buttons are just too stiff, and you got to press them harder than what you should be able to do. And I don't think it's meant to be like that. So yeah, bit of improvement. This mouse could really be a great mouse. Like, it's a really good idea, and if they could take a couple of different look at it, maybe design the buttons differently, making the buttons more like your mechanical buttons, you know, improving on it, and maybe even improving the surface of it a bit, because I got a feeling that the surface is going to wear very rapidly. Like, I even feel it on the joystick already. It's starting to get that kind of stickiness to quality to the joystick already, and that's just with me basically using it and testing it out, just so I could do this review. So yeah, it's got quite a few flaws, and that's why I can't bring myself to recommend this to anyone, whether you be a gamer, designer, or just want a mouse that works better in general kind of use. I just can't recommend this mouse to you. If you're willing to have an attempt, then you can still get these, but like I said, yeah, really hard to recommend this mouse because it's all of its down points. But it is quite an interesting design. It's very unique, very novelty. I mean, it's an 18-button mouse. I mean, look at all those buttons. 18 buttons. Just ridiculous to have 18 buttons on a mouse. So you guys, that was the WarMouse Meta. Very interesting looking mouse, but let down by its poor design and kind of cheaper build quality. But you guys, thanks for watching. I am Sharkie Gamer. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll have heaps more gaming controller and accessory videos up very soon. Feel free to leave a comment down below if you want to, and of course if you like this video, hit that like button. It really helps out a lot, guys. Thanks for watching.